Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Whose fault is it? That's what the disciples ask Jesus when they come across this man who has been blind since birth. Who sinned? Whose fault is it? And in our own way, we do still ask, don't we? Why was this child born with a disability? Is it the fault of the doctor who delivered her? Or is it the mother's fault? Did she do something wrong during her pregnancy? Whose fault is it? Some of you know my daughter Lydia has an intellectual disability. Since the age of 5, her primary diagnosis is autism. And we have watched as families grasping at straws have bought into the idea that childhood vaccines cause autism. Not true. A couple of generations back, people believed that autism was caused by mothers who were not loving and nurturing enough. The mother caused it by being emotionally distant. Also not true. But we can't help asking why. Who sinned? The emotional state of the mother doesn't cause autism. Neither do vaccines. But so badly do we want a reason that sometimes all the proof in the world isn't enough. So deeply do we long for an explanation, for someone or something to blame. So deeply embedded is this belief of our ancestors that disease and disability are at the end of the day caused by sin, somebody's sin. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Why did this happen? More broadly, we ask, why do bad things happen to good people? We know that there is natural evil. That's how the theologians distinguish it. That's tornadoes and hurricanes that level neighborhoods and kill innocent people. It's also illness and disability with no explanation why it strikes one family and not another. We also know that there is moral evil. That's suffering caused by people's choices, abuse, crime, poverty. The disciples are asking about that natural evil. They want, like we do, some explanation other than sometimes it just happens. Disability happens. Illness happens. Storms happen. Nobody did it. He was born that way. But the questions persist. Who sinned, this man or his parents, causing him to be born blind? We might say that the disciples of Jesus, like so many disciples today, are part of the everything happens for a reason crowd. Part of the friends from church who tell someone who is suffering great hardship and pain that it's all part of God's plan. To say that to someone who is hurting may sound better than who sinned, this man or his parents, but it's really a variation on the theme. It's a way of saying, God caused this. God wanted this. God allowed this. And God has God's own divine reasons, a plan for why God did this to you. Trust me, it may make you feel better for a moment to explain away someone's suffering, but it doesn't do anything to take away the pain. And it also doesn't bring the love and mercy of God into the situation. Besides, if we say that it's God's plan or that God caused this, we have to ask, what kind of God is this? Capricious? Vindictive? Callous? The questions are endless. There is never enough explanation of why these things happen. Still we ask, who sinned? Who can we blame? Just as the disciples did, we keep asking until we get an answer or we make one up. And as we've been seeing over and over in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, you don't get it. You don't get it. He says to his own disciples, you are asking the wrong question. Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned. She's fine. She's just fine. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus says. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. Nobody sinned. It's nobody's fault. Jesus says, you are barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. But if we're paying attention, the answer Jesus gives raises questions too. As one of the participants at our Lenten Bible study said, what about all the other people who are blind? Is healing this guy supposed to make them feel better? And so when we give thanks that our prayers were answered and somebody we loved was healed, does that mean that God closed the divine heart and turned the divine back on all the other people who didn't get better? And what of Jesus' exact words? He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. Does that mean that it was part of God's plan to make this person blind so that one day, years later, after he and his family had suffered a lifetime of being socially outcast and blamed for the illness, after he'd become an adult and taken up the only line of work available to a blind man, begging, all of that so that one day Jesus would be passing through and cure his blindness so that more people would believe in Jesus? You got to admit that doesn't sound very good either. Jesus cannot be saying God caused this. And as Christians, we do not, cannot, will not believe that God causes suffering, period. We don't believe that. We believe in a God who is loving and just and powerful and created the earth and everything in it and continues to provide for and take care of this world. We believe in a God who comes alongside those who are suffering, a God who in Jesus takes on human suffering, who truly knows what it is to suffer the depths of human pain. So when Jesus says his disciples are asking the wrong question, hang on. Can I have that, sweetie? Thank you. So when Jesus says his disciples are asking the wrong question, what is the right question? If the wrong question is who sinned, this man or his parents, if the wrong question is why did God do this to these good people, if the wrong question is how can we fit this terrible thing into a perfect picture of how everything happens for a reason according to God's plan, if those are the wrong questions, what is the right question? Jesus says the right question is how are the works of God being revealed? Where and how do we see God's goodness, God's love, God's providence? The right question is, where do we see Jesus in this situation? The right question is, in the midst of all the world's darkness, where is Jesus, the light of the world? The right question is, where is God? The Presbyterian minister, Fred Rogers, who was known to generations of children as Mr. Rogers, took on this and many other difficult issues with children. He helped children with how to cope with bad things they can see happening on the news or in their neighborhoods, especially tragedies like fires and storms and shootings. Anybody remember what he taught the children? Look for the helpers. Look for the helpers. He said, when you hear the sirens, don't ask, why is something bad happening? Look for the helpers. So we don't ask, how is God punishing somebody? We don't ask, why did God let this happen? Instead, we ask, how is God sending help and comfort and healing and mercy? Look for the helpers. Look for the hand of God doing what God does do. Bring love and mercy, comfort and hope. Look for Jesus shining in the darkness, bringing hope and healing and life and mercy. Healing the man born blind wasn't a magic trick to get people to believe in Jesus. No, it's a sign pointing their attention and ours back to God, helping us to see that in Jesus, God is at work in the world. All those people chattering about who sinned, clucking about the tragedy of it all, they turned out to be unable to see the man himself, the person, the human child of God. They could only see blindness and sin and problems. So much so that when he was healed, some of them didn't even recognize him anymore. For them, he was but a problem, a disability, a sign of all that's wrong in the world. How is God being revealed in him? How is God being revealed in and around us? Look for the helpers. Look for the mercy and the comfort, the love and light, the hope and healing. God is revealed when love and mercy are shared, when injustice is upended. The story of the man born blind goes on and on after the healing. It was a long reading. People questioning the credentials of Jesus, people returning again and again to the subject of sin, asking whether someone who's not part of the in crowd, not part of the religious establishment, can do the work of God. It's the gospel's version of church fights. The established Jewish synagogue is in conflict with their fellow Jews who are following Jesus. And they are literally unable to see the hand of God, the glory of God, right in front of them, because they were so focused on the issues they're fighting about. That's how church fights happen, isn't it? No room for Jesus, as the signs are drawn up over who's right. Even his parents can't see it. They can't see the hand of God, the presence of God, God made flesh in Jesus, because they're too fearful of the religious establishment, too fearful of being ostracized by the good religious people, the good church people, than they already are. Without exception, the neighbors, the Pharisees, even the parents are unable to see God in this event, unable to see God at work in Jesus right in front of them. They are blind. That's John's irony, that the people who can see physically are blind, and the person who is blind physically can see, not just literally, but with eyes of faith. I don't know whether he is a sinner, the man says in the makeshift trial that pops up. In other words, what difference does it make? I don't know whether he's a sinner. I do know that I was blind and now I see. We still live in a world in which Christians and non-Christians alike are all too focused on the blame game, on how people deserve what happens to them, all too focused on explaining away suffering and injustice in ways that make us feel better, instead of looking for where the God we know in Jesus is at work. Instead of looking for how we can bring hope and healing, how we can help shine light into the darkness, we get distracted by trying to explain it away. Blaming people for their misfortune, and when that doesn't work, blaming God by saying it's part of God's plan. No, says Jesus, again and again and again, that's not the question. The question is, how is God's goodness revealed? Look for the helpers. Be the helpers. Don't ask who sinned. Ask how you can help. The writer of our Bible study, Adam Hamilton, reminded us last week that in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Both are true, both are essential. We abide in Jesus, the light of the world, so that we might be the light of the world, so that the light of Jesus might shine in and through us. We all know that the evil and suffering in our world can be overwhelming. It's easier and perhaps less painful to explain it away, to look away. But in Jesus, God takes on the whole of evil and suffering and opens the way for us too to open our hearts, to share the burden of others' pain and suffering, to confront the evil and injustice that do have a human cause. And we do it because as Christians, we know that suffering and evil do not have the last word. God's acts in history, and especially in Jesus, tell us that. We walk this Lenten way through stories of great suffering that expose the world's pain and evil, and we confess that sometimes it's all too much. But as we follow Jesus through that suffering, through offering help and comfort to those who suffer today, we are confident that Easter is coming. Confident that in Jesus, God does not take away human suffering and evil, but shows once and for all that they cannot, do not, will not have the last word. Only the light of the world. Only God's grace and mercy do. May we too have the eyes to see. Amen.